And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshowOregon.com. I'm Pete Belcastro. This is Alice Lema. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon. We get together with you once a week here on the radio and on YouTube to talk about our favorite subject, kind of Southern Oregon real estate and real estate in general. How you doing? Here we are, mid-December, so Christmas around if you're out shopping and all that kind of thing. Hope you're having a terrific holiday season, right?
Yeah, and we've had such good weather until just recently. This week it started raining.
And this is, of course, December. We're in that winter selling cycle. That's what we call it right now. Our guest today is Colin Mullane. He's the past president of the Oregon Association of Realtors. How long ago was that, by the way?
Oh, my God.
You got to get close to that mic there.
That was 4 years ago already, Pete, believe it or
4
not.
years ago.
Yeah.
It's
been a while.
It's been a while. And, of course, you're also involved with the National Association as well, and you have a regional position. Tell me what you're doing there.
So 2 years ago already, I was a regional vice president, but I am one of 10 national directors in the state of Oregon, and there's about 700 across the nation, believe it or not. And we get together as a group of national directors twice a year in the spring and in the fall, and we just had our convention about 3 weeks ago in San Francisco. And believe it or not, we had about 28 agents from the Rogue Valley that went down because it's pretty close proximity, and it's a unique opportunity to see an event where there's literally 25,000 realtors from across the country all there to do the same thing and discuss the market and technology and where the industry is going and what are the biggest threats to the industry and how's the consumer doing in all of this. So quite fascinating.
Yeah. Cool. So what were the takeaways from that?
I think that there is a much bigger embrace of technology within our industry and where that's going to go going forward. Things from artificial intelligence to predictive market analytics. There's a lot of different technologies out there. We know our consumers are much better informed than they've ever been. So what are we doing to bring that to the table? A big decision that came down for realtors while we were there was what they call MLS 8.0, which actually reinforces what the MLS is designed to do, which is to get the listings in front of as many eyes as possible in a very short period of time. So the consumer can be assured that what we've always told them, that if you're on the MLS, you're in front of the most number of eyes.
Right.
And there had been a really the industry had been sliding away from that and doing a lot of what we call pocket listings and coming soons, where there's a more limited number of eyeballs that are on that listing.
Oh,
and so
I see.
Way,
okay.
We have recentered it back to the consumer to say, hey, we've heard what you've had to say. We want to make sure you're getting top dollar by being in front of the most number of people. And we spent a week discussing that issue, and then we made a decision at the end of it, and it was almost unanimous relative to how our board would normally go, about 92% in favor of that. So a very, very encouraging piece that, again, realtors are concerned about the consumer, and we have them front of mind.
Yeah. What happens and it's a political year coming up, as we all know. Legislatures meet, the Congress, and that kind of thing. Do you expect any changes, anything, or are we going to just wait till the next election and then we're going to go back and fighting again about, taxes and this kind of thing and real estate and stuff?
Interestingly, one of the best things the National Association of Realtors does is we have a full political crew in Washington, D.C. that does nothing but monitor legislation. And interestingly, despite all the things that have occurred during this administration, we've been very successful with many pieces of legislation related to housing, especially HUD. The condo rule was loosened to where people could get easier financing. So a lot of positive things happened. I think there's a lot of talk always around election year. People get nervous. But if you look at the statistics, they tend to stay pretty stable. Yeah. So if the economy stays trucking along, the interest rates stay somewhat similar, you'll actually find that some individuals might say, I'm not going to buy because, but if you look at statistics, for the most part, the population stays right on track.
Yeah, no, it's true. And our economy here in our own valley, we talk about this all the time, is really... It's pretty good right now.
Yeah, it's much more robust than it used to be.
Problems people have, of course, is finding, replacement properties and stuff like that. But there's a lot of activity going on. So we think it's going to continue. Even though we're in the low part of it right now in December, my goodness, if that selling cycle is true, which it's true, where it goes up in the spring, we're going to go like this, and it's going to be a really very, very, very busy spring. It seems like around, and that's good for everybody.
It's really good, absolutely. And I think we're encouraged by the consistency that the buyers continue to enter the marketplace. We're seeing, I wouldn't call it a resurgence in new construction, but we're certainly seeing a better equilibrium there, where people have choices between pre-existing homes or new construction. I think new construction sales were up 20% over this time last year, which is a positive. But there's still a shortage, and that's one of the key pieces that comes back from the national picture is our national economy is saying our population is growing at a pace faster than the homes that we're able to build, and that's creating the tension in the marketplace in terms of a shortfall of housing and not a lot of affordable housing. So we still want to work with our legislators to say, look, you can't build faster, but if you create rules and regulations that allow us to build faster, we can help solve the problem. So
there were two big Oregon issues this year, right? Rent. The rent
Rent control, statewide rent control.
SB 206, I believe it was, whatever, that changed that rule. And the other one was allowing, multifamily housing on single-family lots. What's the fallout at the state level? Do you hear anything about that?
Yeah, did anybody talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. House Bill 2001, of course, is the one that's allowing multifamily use on single-family residences. Right. Of course, that's still at the discretion of the municipalities in terms of how they interpret that and what they want to do. But it gives freedom to those different cities and parts of the country or the state, frankly, that are seeing struggles to say, listen, if you can put an extra unit on there and you can put it into the housing pool, will it help alleviate the issue? And then the carve-outs are, well, if they're going to do that and all of a sudden it's a VRBO, that doesn't really help the housing issue. It may generate income on a different level for the homeowner, but what's the compromise there? So looking rent control, of course, was, I would call it, it was a really tough issue. It's very emotional. As realtors, we struggled with anyone taking the rights away from a property owner from increasing rates that would be in line with market value. They did put some decent parameters on there in terms of how much could be increased, whether new construction gets applied to or not. I think there's a 15-year exemption on new construction being restrained to that increase. But overall, anytime a legislative body puts parameters around the free market, we know that that's not solving the problem. And so what we really wanted to get to is the heart of the issue, which is supply. What can you do as legislators to ease supply? They didn't address that question. So House Bill 2001 was a march closer in that direction, and we don't yet understand the impact.
No, we don't.
So we'll see.
Well, we'll see if cities do. We've had guests on about it, and we haven't had any applications yet, to my knowledge, around for it. So, but we will check.
Well,
that
and
out.
it was interesting because the director of planning at Medford said that they anticipated that bill passing, and they started loosening the setback rules in Medford city limits last year. In fact, a year ago, December, in anticipation of that.
And we're certainly seeing the cities around here allowing more additional dwelling units on properties and things like that. And even in the rural areas, we're getting some more, at least ability to add more units onto the same place there.
Was there any conversation about that of county zoning being able to have extra units?
I don't think they've addressed it specifically just yet because it seems to be one of the more restrictive pieces, and there's a lot more overlays with zoning like exclusive farm use, woodland resource, and so there's a different impact to that. And so it's at least a step in the right direction to where people that are in urbanized areas where we're trying to avoid more of the Arab, because look at the Rogue Valley, perfect example. If you round the clock back 100 years, what's it full of? Agriculture. And where did we build? We built on the fields where the agriculture was grown. So we're taking away the arable land that is part of the food supply chain, and we're pushing ourselves more and more. So if you go 100 years forward from now, have you taken up all the land that grows the crops that are a vital part of our ecosystem here in the housing market? And so there's a sensibility to, well, let's look at what we already have. Let's encourage infill, and let's encourage people that have enough room on their lot to say, maybe we can add an extra home, we can add an extra unit. Maybe that becomes a viable housing opportunity for somebody that may not otherwise been able to afford to either buy or rent that particular piece. So I think it's creative. It's going to be interesting. I'm somewhat excited to see how cities will implement the rule and what it will look like.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Have you had any reaction from our builder community about the infill law? Are they going to start going in that direction?
Not necessarily. I think that if you look at, again, most new construction lots, you look at the larger builders here in Medford and in Ashland and Phoenix, they're building on fairly small lots already because cities have for the longest time been saying infill and small lots because they don't want to make that big footprint. So the possibility of adding a unit on something that's 0.08 of an acre would be extremely difficult. So it really looks to the older neighborhoods, the older established Medford neighborhoods, Ashland, where you're on a quarter, half acre lot.
Central Point.
What can we do? Exactly. There's lots of it out there. Whether somebody wants to or not, that's going to be their individual
decision. You're right about one thing, all the tiny lots that we see in the new subdivisions, right, around.
Oh, that's
East
the
Medford,
new building model,
that kind of thing, and that's where we are. We got a break coming up here in a couple of minutes, but I want to just get the two of you. I got this, the stat of the week I learned, okay? I'm going to share this with you and get your reaction of what you think of it, okay? This is really interesting. Okay, 9.8% of Americans changed their residence in the last 12 months. Okay, 9.8% of Americans changed their residence in the last 12 months, and that's still 35 million people. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. It was the lowest since 1947, 48. So what does that mean? 9.8% of Americans changed their residence, the lowest in 60 years.
So
what does that mean? What
is
do you think
that
mean?
tenants and And how
Nah,
long? That's just,
don't go. You're good. You're.
well, I think
don't
because
know
I
how
think there's
it's-
two different answers.
Well, I think from what I get
Oh,
from that is that it was not that long ago that the average American family or homeowner moved every 7 years.
Right.
And now that's almost a 10-year statistic. And again, National Association of Realtors had predicted that somewhat. And part of it is a lack of available supply to have an alternative to make the move.
Where am I going to go? If I
Super
move?
low
Okay.
interest rate. So that's actually going to continue to grow because as you're coming off of a super low interest rate environment of less than 4% right now for a 30-year conventional mortgage, if that, let's say in 3 years, not unreasonable to say, that could be 6%, still a historically low interest rate. But if you're going to move somebody from a 4% rate to a 6% rate, the interest, or the appreciation they may have enjoyed in their home gets taken away by the interest rate. So they're like, you know what? Not a good move. I'm going to stay where I'm at. So
It's the payment. Yeah. And, they're predicting that the baby boomers are not moving. They're not downsizing as fast. A lot of them are aging in place. They're not going to move at all. So
Right.
that's going to create some more supply and demand issues.
I would think I could add that people are working from their homes, staying in them longer for that. If you're right, Colin, if you're in the Bay Area, and you want to move, where are you going to go? Your replacement.
Well,
you can't
California
find a
has
replacement
Prop
'cause we can't do
13
it here.
too. That tax impact. in
And they're
Even
looking
the
at
tax is
changing
going to
that.
go up.
Are they?
Yeah, it's on the table. They're looking at changing Prop 13 because it's not a
To-
viable, sustainable model. But changing it to,
Oh.
we'll let somebody else figure out how politicians want to figure out how they like to tax people. But Prop 13 is that tax measure. And we see a lot of that here in the Rogue Valley because so many people come from
And
California.
they ask that question.
And they ask that question. They're like, well, if I buy this house for $600,000,
Right.
are my taxes going to go up? And we have a very different model in Oregon
Right.
that doesn't really have that. We go up by 3% a year for sure, but in California, it resets on sales. So if your grandma owned a house for $200,000 and
Yeah.
sells it now, it's $800,000. That's a huge increase in taxes, and that's what Prop 13 does.
Your taxes in California then are based on the $800,000 sale. That's the market sale. They tried to get that in Oregon too, didn't they?
They did.
And lost that.
Oregon Association of Realtors, you're welcome.
That would have been disastrous. I can't even imagine that. Can you imagine if that?
Yeah,
had
no,
that
it would
been
have
in
been
there?
very negative impact.
Yeah, so it's good to have that you're there looking at this stuff, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Someone's got to look out for everybody.
Yeah, and overall in Oregon, what's coming up? Do you think? I mean, that's affecting the
You know,
next year.
it's been a really interesting couple, 2-3 years at the Oregon legislature. There's a supermajority on all sides.
I like how you say that. It's interesting. Yeah.
In fairness, I think there's only, I don't even know if there's one state in the entire union that doesn't have a supermajority on one side or another. And so we're having to figure out different ways to talk about our issues related to housing that really continue to be consumer-centric, which is what we are focused on. But a healthy and viable housing economy is super important to the state of Oregon and states all over the country. And so we're really hesitant to allow legislators to look at homeowners as being a blank check for every single thing that they need to fund because we can't just continue to put that on the back of the homeowner.
Right.
No,
well,
and
since we don't have a sales tax, it does fall on the back of the property owners, and we're not an open checkbook forever.
Yep.
Well, when you have enough of it, then we have a revolt, and then we start all over again. And the 3% creep is nearing that, for a lot of people. And so we're going to see what happens in the future. We got a break coming up here. We're with Colin Mullane today here on the Real Estate Show. Pete and Alice, we're coming right back with more right after this. And welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro, Alice Lema with you today. Colin Mullane's with us as well. He's a past president of the Oregon Association of Realtors, also a realtor here in the Valley at Full Circle, right? You're one of the
That's
owners
exactly
of
right. Yep.
that place, Full Circle in Ashland. So, okay, let's talk about our market here. What do you see it, by the way? What are you going here, December?
What a great and interesting year it was, and fascinating for a lot of reasons. And probably the most interesting one is Ashland. And the reason I bring that up is we were really concerned at the statistics coming out of Ashland very early in the year. We were seeing a 75% increase in supply over last year, which
There was
looked like
a bunch more listings.
which is
right,
the complete opposite problem that we have now. So now in Ashland, our inventory levels are actually down 6.5% from where they were. So that's an 80% swing from March to today. And I think a lot of that was due to the conversations many of us that work the Ashland market were having with our clients around smoke. If you're going to wait until June, July, August to sell your property, you may be competing with the smoky environment, which reduces showings. People don't come to the area, creates concern. And so everyone front-loaded and said, I'm going to list in January, February, March. And so you had this massive influx. And then through the year, the sales caught back up and inventory returned to the level it was at. So, but we didn't know. We felt that that's what they were doing in March. And to your earlier comment, it's like it's great to be right because that was one of the things we thought was happening, and it did. And the sale pattern was pretty consistent. But there was a concern that the market was getting flooded, and maybe Ashland was an indicator that we were seeing a shift in the market.
Because Ashland is a leading indicator. Yep. It really is. And this is why you want a professional realtor to help you, because it's not something you would normally know on your own, that these little micro movements in the market, you know, consumers are not aware of them. That's why you want a professional realtor helping you.
All right, you brought up Ashland. Let's say in the 3-month period, September through November, 84 sales, 91 days average on the market. That's almost double from the rest of the valley. Okay, which makes sense. Average price, so the median price was $498,000, up 14% from a year ago too. So. All right,
that's a nice clip.
That's people. If you own property there, you're probably pretty happy with that, right?
but it was wild swing though. It was a wild swing this year.
Overall prices rose 5.5% in the 3-month period, which is a steady. I'm good with that. I like that. That's a nice steady return on your investment on your property. Correct.
Well, it's sustainable.
Yeah,
we're not in crisis anymore.
Yeah, I like that. Yep. What else you see on the things? I mean, you can go through rural properties. We went through this thing with hemp last week. I was fascinated, by the way, Colin, and what's happening with that. Rural properties seem to be rebounding, though, now that we're through it. There were more sales in rural properties, 142 in Jackson County. They averaged $394,000, and their price was up overall, up about 4%, it's been down in rural lands.
Well, and we wondered if we were going to start seeing some profit from the new industry of hemp, that if that might spur some of those folks to purchase instead of lease, because so many of those growers are leasing.
Mm-hmm. And they seem to. Yeah.
Well, and of course, the federal change in the law that allowed federal loans to be associated with lands being purchased for the use of hemp made a big difference, because when you're just operating in a cash environment like we did when marijuana became legal in Oregon, which is still not federally, it inhibits the marketplace and the transfer of property because there's so many restrictions, and you get title companies that cannot and will not touch the transaction. And so it's essentially a black market for sales, as opposed to hemp, where it can be federally funded with government-backed mortgages and products, and it can be closed in a title company. And so there's a lot more confidence in that piece. But I think there was, the stats on the hemp growing are just astonishing in terms of the amount of land, et cetera. So it'll be really interesting to see. I think in 2 or 3 years we'll fully understand, is this something that's going to continue to explode and to grow? I mean, we have great land for it, but is there a tolerance within the community to allow it to continue at this pace? Is the profit level there that allows people to want to continue to be here? So I think there was the initial gold rush, if you will, or
kind of like
green
cannabis,
rush,
right? We went through the same thing.
Absolutely, but much more land being planted here. There was at least a lot more restrictions on the cannabis, and so I think the jury's still out with the residents of Jackson County as to how they're feeling, and Josephine County, about what the impact is. And so I think 2 or 3 years will be a very interesting time to have that conversation again.
There's a lot of concern about the having the people who help harvest, because it was so labor intensive and in such a short period of time, and then what happens to them when the harvest is over.
Well, I can tell you, living in an area where there's a lot of hemp grows around that used not be there, I'm seeing a lot of trailers that didn't used to be there. I'm seeing a lot of temporary shelters and tents going up. And I'm not judge or jury on this. I'm making a comment that, well, when you have human beings, there are other things associated like that with showering and bathroom facilities. Are those being properly located on site? And what does that look like? And are these, these are the types of things that cause tension in the marketplace and amongst communities. But, hey, I had rules. I had to abide by them. Are these people abiding by them, or are they not? Balance that with, this is a very viable crop that's bringing in industry and some money into the valley. And so where's the balance? What does that look like? That's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, and we were wondering, where people are coming from and how labor intensive. I think I didn't realize that, how labor intensive it is to harvest an acre of hemp. Wow, it's a lot to it and all that kind of thing as well. One of the things happening in our market is that inventories have I think there was so much activity in October and November that by now our inventory has dropped, and the stats really bear that out. In Josephine County, it's down 28% from a year ago.
Wow, that's huge.
Okay, in available homes on the market. In Jackson County, it's down 18%. There's less than 1,000 homes available. That hasn't happened in years now. We've several years before we've come to this. So that's really a big part of it. And of course, within that within that frame, you've got different, price ranges that also affect what's available and what's not. But overall, that's really the biggest issue right now, is that there's just not, they're just way down, right?
Well, not only that, but it confirms what any realtor that's busy in the marketplace, and I think that's a key point, is there are a lot of realtors that are out there. All of us are doing our best to do the best job for our clients, but having key pieces of information to allow the consumer to make the best informed decision, as Alice mentioned earlier, knowing the market, knowing the statistics. People ask, when's the best time? A seller will if you ask a seller uninvited, they will tell you springtime. Why? Because the flowers are blooming, the weather is good.
The yard
but guess
looks
what?
beautiful.
There's no better time than to sell right now when the inventory is low, because buyers that haven't found something by the end of this year are actively searching, and they are combing the market. Now, it's also the least convenient. Families in town, you're cooking meals, you're putting up the tree, the weather. I mean, it's not fun to try and sell a house right now, but if you're wondering at the best time, it might be right now.
Yep. See, and I agree. And additionally, I'm concerned that next year we're going to have a tsunami of listings come, because the crash has been over for some time. It takes a while for the consumer and the marketplace to absorb that information. We just had this huge run up, and now the run up's over, and we're just back to normal, tinking along at our 3 to 5%. So I think people are going to be nervous about the election, and we're going to see a lot more listings. So yes, sell now.
Yes, you both are unanimous.
But we'll see.
in that,
Those are our
aren't you?
predictions.
Well, and we'll see what December brings. You're right. There's a lot. The reason it's out there, if in a big month, the MLS has about 10,500 openings on the key boxes, right? In November, there's still over 8,000 of them. So that's not a big drop, really.
That's what I mean. The buyers are still there.
Yes.
Buyers don't have seasons the way sellers do.
Right.
Sellers in their mind have created that March through September window.
I'm going to wait.
Buyers don't fall out.
Yeah.
Buyers are like, I didn't find it. I'm going to wait. And so you may have a better chance of getting a higher price for your home right now, because the absence of competition exists.
In absence of competition, John L. Scott has this housing market update that comes out for Jackson County, right? Once a month, I think it is. Anyway, and this is what they're saying: $0 to $250,000 price. Last month, 51% of those went pending in the first 30 days. Okay, 250 to 350,000 range. Okay, 60% of those went pending in the first 30 days. In 30 days in November, there's a severe shortage of inventory in that 250 to 350 range, and shortages in the 0 to 250 and 350 to 5. Okay, if you go above those, now all bets are off. The 500,000 and above, it's a totally different market. But boy, you're right though. You can get some good prices and still multiple offers on if you're priced right in these lower price ranges, right?
Price is everything. It always has been. It always will be. There's a couple of gems out there across the Rogue Valley. The clients walk in your office and go, if that house ever comes on the market, I want to buy it, right? Yeah. But there's maybe 15 or 20 of those houses in the valley. Yeah. Everybody else is a lot more price sensitive. Yeah. So the temptation for sellers is always to push it 5 or 10% higher than what you're saying the market will bear. And in some cases, in a hot market, that bears out okay. Right now, the market's so super sensitive that if you're willing and wanting to push that 5 or 10, you'll be the one that's sitting there 60, 90, 100 days doing a price reduction to the point you're not even going to get the original value we proposed. So there's a cost to it.
Especially in the higher price ranges. We've got houses that are priced in that $500,000 to $700,000 range. And if you just do a 1.5% reduction, I've seen houses go into escrow and close, but that's not a super big move. We're talking like $15,000 or $20,000, which is still a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but when we're talking real estate, that's not a big price reduction, and it made all the difference in the world. Mm-hmm.
Well, shortages in those inventories, those lower price ranges. That's where our market is right now, and that's where a lot of activity is going. So again, as you guys both say, in that 350, 250 range. You got less competition today than you're going to have in March, April, and May, right?
Yep.
That's kind of the bottom line.
Now, if you're a buyer, you're kind of like you're disheartened right now, going nothing's going to come on in December. Why would it? There's always stuff happens in December, regardless. But they may find themselves with more choices coming into the spring. But again, if you're the seller listening to this conversation, you've got to be thinking, why would you wait for all of your neighbors to put their house on the market in the spring? Do it now while they're not there.
And you're predicting the surge, right? You've been saying that for
I
months
just think
now.
that's what's going to happen. It takes so long for people to realize. It takes years for communities to realize that the market has changed, and then it's on to its next cycle, and their mindset is still one cycle behind. So I think they're going to be absorbing the fact, and plus the election year, and you throw in these ridiculous interest rates. Yeah, I think people should do it now. If you're going to sell in the next 36 months, I would do it now. I would not wait.
Yeah, well, you may be right, and we'll bear it out as the months ahead as we go along. I've always figured that new construction, of course, in our valley is it's so interesting. I just would tell you there were 91 new constructions, new homes, which seems to be a lot in a 3-month period. That's like one a day. And we still are nowhere near what, and those are single family units. We can talk about different types of that, but one a day we're still not catching up, and we're still behind here, and that's our big problem still, right?
It's a challenge. Yeah. It certainly is. And if you look at, so I have a developer builder who bought a piece of property earlier this year, and it has room for 42 units in Ashland. Now, 42. Wow. And we closed on this back in August. It's realistically going to be at least another 8 months before he can build on that property. So, and most of that's red tape. And it's government overlay. And I'm not anti-government or saying anything like that, but there's a process to it, and I get it. But for the people that do this every single day, it's tedious because they know they could probably get from start to finish in 30 days if there was an efficient way to do it. If the city offices and their staff were staffed appropriately, not blaming anyone individually, but this is what we talk about when we talk to legislators, is my client has to sit on that land at a value with an interest rate ticking in the background, paying out every single month until he can start to build, and then it's 9 months before he's got something to build. Who endures all that cost? The buyer. Those homes can come on the market faster and cheaper if government overlay kind of looks at an expedited process within reason. I'm not talking about that cost the ecological factors or anything like that, or that like building faster to the detriment of the home or the homeowner, but there's overlays there. There's time clocks that could move a lot faster that would allow inventory to come to the market faster.
It's probably the biggest complaint I've ever heard from builders is that.
Well, and that's a long time to be sitting before you even break ground. That's if I'm adding that up right, that's like 16 to 18 months.
And it ends up adding costs.
Well, and what if the market is different? That's a huge amount of risk to be asking our builder community.
That's the problem. Is because you close on the property, you start to pay the interest on the property, and all of a sudden the market's changed by the time the house hits and you can't hit your price point. That's a huge risk.
Yeah, there should be some accommodation for that.
Big risks, big rewards sometimes too, isn't it, along the way? We got a break coming up here. One more segment to go. We're with Colin Mullane today here on the Real Estate Show, talking market, our Southern Oregon real estate market here in mid-December. Pete and Alice, we're coming right back after this. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Next week here on the show, we got the president of the Southern Oregon Multiple Listing Service and the ARVAR president are both going to be with us. So we're going to kind of wrap up the year, their impressions of what took place, and of course what they look for as well in 2020, which is going to be here before you know it. Pete and Alice here today on the Real Estate Show. Thanks for joining us. Colin Mullane is with us. We're talking the market. I love the market. I mean, I don't mind December. You know, I like December. And you guys are right. But there's still a lot of people out there looking. And don't ever think that it filters away. You got to be on top of it. You just got to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no time off for us.
No.
I mean, this is a 12-month-a-year job. and if you think about that, there's a lot of states where that's not the case. I've got a lot of realtor friends back in the Midwest, and there's 3 months of the year they can't show property.
They can't even show.
Right.
Can't even show.
Nothing.
So they have a seasonal. We don't.
That's why they all go to Arizona.
Well, and it's like that in Arizona, too. You don't sell that many houses in the summer unless you have your hot pads on.
Oh, yeah, so. All right. Well, talk about where we're heading, you think, now. What do you got?
I just did some homework today because I was curious about how our sales year-to-date looked compared to last year.
Okay.
And they're surprisingly similar. This time last year, we had sold, this is just residential, 6,039 residential properties this time last year.
Okay.
Exactly. This year, year-to-date 2019, we're at 6,022. So 6,022 to 6,039. That's
Okay.
almost exactly the same. And it's
Okay.
just been such a wild ride this year.
It was spread out in different times. It was
Right.
really heavy in the
Right.
fall,
But we're
winter and
almost-
spring was I thought was relatively slow compared to maybe other times too. Okay.
But the average days on market for Southern Oregon residential last year was 23 average this time last year. And now, 2019, it's 58, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
still ridiculously fast, right? Nobody should complain. But we're starting to see these little inklings of a normalizing market.
You think so? Okay. Here's another stat for on the market snapshot that we prepare for Jackson County. This gives you the months of supply of inventory, okay, which is kind of how it's all predicated on. 6 months is that normal market, right? A lot of places are that way, right? I mean, around the country, I would assume.
Well, a lot of places would consider a 6-month inventory to be normal.
Would be
but
normal,
you're still
right,
seeing
right.
much shorter than that across the board.
Okay. In Jackson County, overall, 150 to 250,000 price range has a 1.7 month supply. 250 to 350, it's a 1.3 month supply. 350 to 5, it's 3 months, halfway there. Once you go above $500,000, then we've got 6 months, 13 months, 22 months above $1 million.
Yep.
That tells you a whole lot about what our market's doing.
But some of the $1 million properties are selling. They're not sitting, they're not, they are sitting, and it takes almost a year
Yeah.
or more. Some
Or
of them
more,
took
or
2
more.
years to sell, but they are selling.
Yeah,
What's
and they make
hap-
up a small part of our inventory too.
Very, very small.
Luxury market's really flattened.
What markets?
The luxury market is flattened.
I statistically, I'm not really seeing that bear out just yet.
Really?
Yeah, because they're still moving here from markets where theirs are healthy. And if you look at the feeder markets into ours, which are the big, the Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area, LA, a lot of people from Seattle, interestingly, making decisions to retire down here for weather and traffic reasons. Believe it or not.
Weather and traffic
yeah.
reasons. Yeah.
And so there's still enough movement there that it's been interesting to see some of those homes come on the market and then sell a bit. But it's never a fast moving market.
No.
It never is, and it's a really difficult one to get pricing correct because it's relative to so many different things other than your traditional comparison. Because you're going to do a market analysis on a home in a neighborhood. It's way easy versus a very custom built home in a very unusual area with all kinds of features that I can tell you how much they cost to put the features in, but how much does it
Yeah.
look
You're
like
going to
in
get it back out.
and
Yeah.
the more customized the home is, the less likely it suits the next person with the same amount of money who has their own flair and taste and may want things different. So it's a very different market for a whole set of different circumstances.
Boy, it's very true. And there's some beautiful places out there. We go into them every week, as you know, and there's some nice ones. And good luck selling some of those too.
Yeah.
As we go along. In the end, prices have stabilized here. I think we should be pleased with that. We have on January 1st, we're going to have a new set of real market value stats that come from the county. It'll be interesting to see what percentage overall that is, and of course where you are, and if you're in Ashland or Medford or Central Point, they're different. So that is ahead, so we're going to know a little bit more of the value that's out there as you price your places for next year, right?
And one of the things I'm wondering that maybe you've heard about is the new tax that's coming. It's going to be affecting local businesses, statewide. And I think that goes into effect in January, doesn't it? Is any of the housing market preparing for some kind of reaction?
That's one of those ones that's harder to understand. We did have some conversations as realtors. Salem is no different than Washington, D.C. There are multiple sides of every single proposal and argument that you could possibly have. And this was one, I think, that the realtors, we took a long, hard look at and felt that for the most part our constituents weren't as affected by it as some of the other. We got to pick our fights. There's so many to have every single year. So I got my letter in the mail saying, hey, you're a company.
Everybody got the letter in the mail. Everybody got
January,
the letter.
but I don't think it's going to impact a lot of real estate practitioners because of how we do it. So you might sell, an office might sell, $10 million worth of homes, but we don't make $10 million. Our clients do. We make a portion thereof as a commission fee. So we had to make sure that the legislature didn't look at that and say, oh, you sold $10 million and pay taxes accordingly, in which case no one would make any money. But it is a great. And one of the things that we look at is that, and we want to make sure that as people sell their homes, and the people associated with home selling, which is the mortgage broker, the title companies, the realtors, obviously, the people that work at Home Depot, the people that work at the local stores, are all impacted by the pace of house sales. And what we've seen is that the housing market across the country represents upwards of 25% of our economy as a whole. So we're a very important piece. It's not just selling homes; it's everything that goes along with it.
It's the septic people and the electricians,
everybody. And so we're mindful of that when we're out there and we're talking on people's behalf of how important housing is, because it's not just a home and a homeowner, it's everything else that's impacted. And if we get the balance wrong and we crash our own market, we dramatically impact the economy, and we don't want to be the reason the economy crashes. So we do watch for those things coming out of Salem. That one was the one that we felt was going to affect larger businesses at larger, and they have their own valid arguments for that. That just wasn't something that we as realtors were necessarily going to get into.
If you were probably, Alice, if you were a big developer, and you built a lot of homes, someone like Hayden Homes, I'll just throw that out there, who they're the ones who are going to be hit by this type of tax if it comes into it.
But won't that trickle down to the locals?
No, it trickles down to the consumer in the end. You pay for it every end. They're going to charge 0.57% over $1 million in sales on businesses. So we have a bar, a restaurant. We're going to be hit by this tax, and all you have to do, you have to pass it on to the consumer.
And what about the hospitals and Harry and David and Amy's Kitchen and all those people?
How do you think they're going to raise?
Our big employers.
That's how you raise $1 billion in a year, is you tax these people, and that's what it is.
Yep. And like I said, we pay really close attention to these pieces, but there are so many people directly related to housing. We knew that other organizations were going to be well represented with their discussions on those levels at the Hill, and we let them do their job.
Well, anyway, that's a discussion for another day, as when that thing takes effect and we go along. In the meantime, we're about out of time. So, hey, it's great to have you here, and I'm looking forward to 2020. I think it's going to be a fascinating year on a lot of fronts.
A new decade. Here we go.
Including real estate, and a new decade.
And we made it. So it's 10 years. The crash is 10 years, over 10 years old. Yeah. We got through it. We're all still here. We have a good 10 years looking forward.
Our market is doing well. The economy is doing well. We have lots of issues out there still that are there, but overall, in terms of our world, okay, and our world is real estate and that kind of thing, it's pretty solid right now.
It hasn't looked better in a long time. I mean, there was a lot of overcorrection after the last crash, and the crash was caused by a ton of other factors, and the stabilization that's occurred in the marketplace since then is really encouraging. And so we have every reason to believe that as the market changes, any changes going forward, not any and all, but most changes that we're looking at coming forward will have a much lower impact on the housing industry relative to what happened before, which is a wonderful thing, because a predictable, steady housing market is a predictable, steady economy.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. Absolutely. All right,
Yay
we're out of time.
That.
All right, we're out of time. We got to go. So, hey, thanks for joining us here today. Thanks to Brett Nance, who ran our camera here for our YouTube show. We appreciate his help as well. Christmas is almost here. Hope your holiday season is a good one and you enjoy yourselves as well. For Colin Mullane, Alice Lema, I'm Pete Belcastro. Have a great week, everybody, and God bless you all.